Martine finally woke, it was hours later. The sun was high in the sky, or at least he assumed so by how bright the room was, even through his eyelids. He'd slept great, which was odd, given how he'd seen in that mirror. He'd worry about that later, though. Right now, the only problem was his chest felt tight. He hoped he wasn't coming down sick. Wait, no, that was purring. He cracked an eye open to find a massive white cat on his chest. He sighed. That doll better not have spit you up. I beg your evermost earnest pardon, Martine Navarro. Reba's aggravated voice came from the large, pure white forest cat sitting on his chest in her judgmental blue eyes. I am too beautiful to have come from that godforsaken doll. That thing looks like a twice-chewed lump of nondescript roadkill that all of creation, Satan included, forgot. Martine stared at her for a moment and then groaned. I take it back, he said dryly. I wish the doll had. At least those are cute. The cat flicked her ears back and dug her claws into his chest with a hiss. Ow! Get off of me, you menace! Martine half yelped as he detached her from his chest. He dropped her on another part of the bed and then sat up. The fuck was he supposed to do with a gun that turned into a cat? He scrubbed at his face and stared across the room where Theo's bed was diligently made. It had been like that every morning when Theo left. Not that Martine's was any different. He hauled himself out before Babs could get any more bright ideas. He rubbed his chest and then sighed. Of all the people he could get as a sentient weapon, it was her. Why couldn't it have been Jules or Marcus? Or hell, he would have taken Trent McNair. Reba puffed up and began sauntering around the room with her tail straight up like a bottle brush. Meow. Martine, I'm hungry. Meow. Meow. What do you mean you're hungry? Martine groaned. You're a gun. We're a gun. She was a cat now, but she surely couldn't be an actual cat. Meow. Hungry. Reba stretched her paws out and did a little stretchy stretch, then reached up to start sharpening her claws on the doorframe. Martine went to grab her, scooping her up off the floor before she could do much damage. Stop it, he hissed. You're going to get me thrown out. Hungry. Reba put one delicate but gigantic foot directly on his cheek and pushed. Martine groaned. Normal cats were bad enough. What did you even feed a gun? She had bullets. He groaned and dropped her back on the bed. Maybe the weird book he'd shown up with would have a clue. He thought he'd seen something about guns in there on a brief flip-through, though the words might as well have been whatever the language he'd seen Theo write in his book in passing. The one that was all stars and lines. That seemed interesting, especially since he wrote it with his knife. Maybe Martine would ask him about it one day, once he could speak common. The first page still didn't make any more sense to him than it did the first time he flipped through it, but it kind of seemed like English. Sometimes. Can I get fried catfish, Martine? With collards? Reba purred and began doing kneads on his stubbly cheek. The book would require some real study if he was going to figure it out. You're a gun, and maybe a cat. Neither of those things can have fried fish or collard greens, Babs. He groused and stared at the words on the page. He sure hoped they were words. So where am I supposed to get those? I haven't seen a damn thing that looks like a catfish, and I definitely ain't seen collards. Get creative, she burped, and got bored of bothering him, and decided to look at the book. Do you think the kid with the board can help us with this? Oh, just get creative, Babs. I'm not even on Earth. He snorted and shook his head. Probably not. This is definitely English, I think. He'd managed to decipher some of it, but he still wasn't wholly certain. But you know what? Maybe he has some greens for you. He hauled her up onto his shoulder, closed the book, and then tucked it away. It had taken him an embarrassingly long time to figure out that he'd been staring at a sauce stain that had wiped away and might have once had a word under it. He left the room and wandered over to Bastian and Riley's room, hoping Bastian was there. There was a thump as something hit the door, and then Bastian stood there, flushed red in the face, doll in hand. What? he snarled, and chucked the haunted doll at the other wall. Bastian inhaled through his nose and drug a hand through his curls. Sorry, I'm just... With a flick of his hand, the journal on the side table flipped shut. Stressed. Martine blinked and eyed the doll. Should I come back later? The doll pulled itself off the floor, shook itself like a dog before looking up at the two and holding its right hand and tapping the right side of its forehead. It laid its ears back and walked off to pull itself up the bed next to the notebook where it sat. No, it's fine. Bastian smiled, and a golden mage hand picked up and threw the doll back at the wall for good measure. Did you need something? Martine watched the doll hit the wall again, with the eyebrows raised and a slight tongue click. You wouldn't happen to have any greens, like alchemical ones. The doll pulled itself off the wall again, tilting its head at the have any greens. Its tail thumped against the floor, once again tried to make its way to the bed where it could sit. What? Bastian blinked a few times, and then snapped its fingers. The mage hand behind him did too, and vanished as he went digging around in his bag until he came out with a rolled-up joint, and he offered it to Martine. Martine stared at it, the dial noises clear on his face as he tried to figure out what he'd said that would translate to weed. Then he closed his eyes with a sigh and a laugh. No, not... Yeah, I can see how I walked into that. No, Okay, so... There was this manual that came with the gun, but frankly, it's written in chicken scratch. And I just figured out what one of the pages said. And it said that I needed alchemical ingredients to put in the gun. He didn't know how to explain that the gun had asked for collard greens. The doll stared at the two, its tail doing a swish before it scooched a bit more toward them, as though it needed to be any closer to listen to them. Bastian blinked a few times and lit up the joint, put it between his own lips to drag it up like someone who had smoked a lot of random stuff just to see what it would do. Okay, well, gonna need a gun then. The white cat jumped down and opened her mouth for whatever offering she was supposed to get. Hungry! Martine gestured to the door where Babs was. Don't ask me how or why. I'm sure it's in the book, but I can't read the damn thing. I spent an hour trying to decipher an ink smudge because it just looked like everything else around it. The doll leaned to the side so they could see past Bastian at the cat that was no longer on Martine's shoulders. Bastian reached down and grabbed the doll by the ears and lifted it so it could see the cat too. But, okay, this is a gun? She burped at him. Okay. Bastian set the doll on the bed that was made immaculately, as if it hadn't been used. So does she eat it? I guess so. Your guess is as good as mine. My guns don't usually turn into cats, or talk back to me. Martine shrugged. Between you and me, if you hadn't called it a gun before, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. Bastian admitted. It wasn't exactly a common item. Martine shrugged. Yeah, that's fair. He rubbed his neck. I'm still figuring everything out, to be honest. I'm still not sure how this, he gestured to his chest, magic thing works. Never had that before. Probably wouldn't have noticed at all had it not been for Carver. Been kind of winging it and hoping for the best. He knew in theory how casters worked, though he hadn't played many. I mean, Bastian shrugged as he went over to his bag and started picking at different alchemical items he'd put in there that he had either picked or bought. You're a warlock, aren't you? Didn't your patron give you any hints? Lily didn't have time, Reba said as she confidently strode over to the bed toward the bag of snacks Bastian appeared to be dumping out. The doll hung there watching the cat until Bastian moved, its tail twitching slightly as it was moved around. Martine huffed a laugh. No, I had a friend show up at my door, middle of the night, pouring rain, asking for help. I said okay, because he's always helped me when I needed it. Next thing I know, I'm on that boat with y'all. Awkward. Bastian scrubbed his ears as if he'd heard something he wasn't supposed to. Well, we can try to figure out... Fish! Reba crowed as she pounced on the doll and sent them both tumbling to the ground. The doll flailed its arms and kicked the giant cat. Pow! Babs! Martine hissed and lunged down to grab her. Stop it! Fucking Christ! Can you just behave? The last part slipped out in English in a growl that definitely came from his days as an instructor. Reba held onto the plush even as she was grabbed. Fishy! Bastian didn't seem like he knew what to do, and he wasn't sure how to feel about it. On the one hand, the thing had just threatened his entire understanding of itself. On the other, please don't hurt my friend, Bastian whined as he knelt down to try and help. There were claws and teeth and all from the cat. A tearing sound and teeth went into the plush. It had its paws up to the big white cat's chest. It needed more reach. From the plush's head, an icy blue mage hand wafted. It tensed for a second as though in pain, and then stretched its fingers into the cat fur, splaying out his fingers as it ran through the thick, white, fuzzy fur, scratching behind both ears with thumb and pointer finger and pinky, while the rest of the hand dragged deep, relaxing scritches into the skull to give that brain a good, relaxing scratch. Reba froze. A soft click, and then she poofed into a gun in a haze of smoke and orange glitter, apparently. At least it seemed to vanish and not settle on anything. Martine had been trying to pry her off, and when she was suddenly a gun again, he sighed with relief and then ran a hand through his hair. Thank you. I'm sorry. He reached out to the doll to make sure Babs hadn't done too much damage. There was very glaring scratch marks down the doll's body. From this close, Martine would be able to tell that this plush was not made of soft cotton fabric, or even that stuff plushies are normally made out of. This was made of leather. What kind? You're not sure, but it's leather for sure. As the doll pushes itself up, its tail thumps and looks up at him and then forces itself onto his feet, turns around, and reaches its paws up to Bastian. As it turns and walks away, Martine will see that there is in fact a tag sewn onto the back just under the golden lobster clasp. He doesn't manage to read it, but the fact remains that somewhere in his mind he feels like he can. Those letters are not from here. Martine tapped his fingers on his thigh, an old habit he thought he'd broken years ago. Apparently not. He pulled his outstretched hand back and then dropped it. Anything I could do to help? I could sew. I'm all right with leather. I could go talk to Bai, or do you heal like the rest of us? Theo's got potions from somewhere. Bastian had pulled the plush up to hold it like a baby with an extremely panicked expression. He was all knees and elbows locked around the tiny doll. Are you okay? Are you gonna die? Oh my god, the cat just attacked my doll. He was hyperventilating for just a moment, then he managed to correct himself and look down at the damage. I think he's a construct. He probably has to be mended. I can mend. This is leather. It can be magically mended, I think. Do you need me to go get you anything? The tapping had gotten faster, less of a steady beat, and more of an anxious rhythm. Bastian rubbed his cheek on the doll, and out of instinct came up to rub just under one of his ears, and then rub those fingers down the little leather face. Do you have leather? It doesn't need a component, but the spell behaves better when it has something to work from, something that isn't already worn or ripped. It won't consume it. His wallet was pretty new. He dug it from his pocket. The brown leather was still glossy, barely any patina on it. He pulled the cards and photos and kids' drawings out the best he could without letting Bastian see all of the things that didn't belong in this world. Unfortunately, his hands were sweating and he fumbled a good portion of them. God damn it. He should have just gone to buy some leather. The doll watched him fumble, looked down at the man's hands and then back up to his face. Its tail wrapped around Bastian's arm, and it snuggled against him as a distraction to help the fumbling man. There was a soft, crunchy, almost crinkling sound that with a bit of focus sounded like a young cat. A cat that had never purred before. Reba sounded like an engine when she purred. It definitely wasn't coming from the gun. The leather wallet in hand, Bastian swallowed and opened it till he found the soft inside of the billfold, and then he began to cast mending with that added assistance. The doll was fully healed by the time Bastian cast mending a few times. It would answer all face rubs with its own, and its small paws on his face. Its tail tightened on his arms, and his ears were back so as not to hit his. While Bastian had been busy mending the doll, Martine had been cleaning up everything that was scattered across the ground. While most of it had been tucked away into his pockets, he had stopped on a family photo. The edges were worn, and the photo was crinkled in a few places from being pulled out, in and out of his wallet. He sighed when he realized Bastian was done and tucked it away with the rest of his wallet's contents. All good? Bastian looked up and nodded. Yeah. He glanced at Martine's hands and back up. That's a beautiful painting. They look perfectly real. Are they your kids? The doll also looked up at Martine, wanting to know the answer. Yeah, my whole family. I miss them. Martine nodded. He almost pulled it back out, but stopped himself. If he did, Bastian might notice there were no brush strokes, that it was a perfect lifelike image, as though seen through a window. He might notice Jack and Gabe and how much they looked like the fisherman and the young roan who chased him. Bastian watched Martine closely and smiled a little. It's a beautiful family. You don't have to tell me your secrets, and I won't ask, as long as you promise not to ask for mine either. He raised one hand, pinky out. Promise? Martine held his hand and crossed his pinky with Bastian's. Promise. I'd tell you if I could, but that's about the only part of the deal I made when I came here that I can remember. Probably said too much as it is. The doll placed its paws on the extended arm. It had no pinky. That seems like it's probably too much. Bastian smiled a little tighter than he meant to. It's selfish, but I'm glad you're here. And you too. He plopped his hand on top of the doll. Not so spooky after all. Its paws went up to grab the hand as it came down onto its head. It wasn't so spooky. It tried not to be. It could be, but it tried not to be most of the time. Probably. Martine rubbed his neck. Just pretend I didn't say anything. He was so out of practice pretending to be someone else and just not existing in general. It didn't help that he'd been thrown into this without so much as a hey, heads up or a debrief. The Marines had at least given him months to practice. I'm not unhappy to be here. I like y'all. You're good people. I'm just still coming to terms with everything. I'm sure you miss them. Bastian gestured to the wallet. The paintings you think I shouldn't see. He grinned, cheeky enough to reveal dimples. I thought you weren't going to ask about my secrets. Martine snorted as he gently shoved Bastian's arm. It's not asking, it's noticing. Bastian laughed and gently scratched the doll's head behind its ears. I'm sorry you're stuck here dealing with this when you should be home with them. Martine shrugged. Can't just tell a friend no because it's inconvenient. He stuck his neck out for me a lot. Wasn't exactly what I had in mind when I agreed, but I'm here, for better or worse. I guess it's just the not knowing what's going on back home that's a problem for me. When he got back, would it still be the day he left? Would time have moved on? Did he disappear, or was there another version of him living his life? Or was there another him, but in a coma? Well, that sounds horrible, Bastian sighed and fiddled with his long ears on the doll, gently rubbing them to the end like one might do to a long-eared dog. I'm not sure the terms of your pact, but if I do what I came to do, Shbaba will let you leave. Martine shrugged, hoping that what Bastian was here to do wasn't against what Martine was here to do. Not that he really knew what that was. The terms and conditions of the deal hadn't been exactly clear. That'll be nice. In the meantime, you figure you can help me with some stuff. I can help you with hand-to-hand if you help me with magic and common. I could try. Bastian perked up and leaned over the doll. What do you need help with? I don't know what I'm doing. I think I cast something before, but I don't know how. It just happened. He shrugged. It was after Croya prayed at the damn shrine. The goose with black coming out. I'm pretty sure that was me, but I don't know how I did it. The doll was enjoying the scratches and ear rubs, going so far as to lull its head to the side every now and then, but it was paying attention to the conversation and bunted Bastion's chin when he leaned over. It wiggled its arms, and its tail shifted from Bastion's bicep to his forearm. Yeah. Bastion's expression was suddenly sharp. I have a question, and it's kind of out there, so just bear with me here. Is your eye color, is that a family thing? Is that common? His eyes? Martine tilted his head. I got it from my father's side. It's not real common, but it happens outside my family. Why? No reason. Bastion smiled like a Cheshire cat, complete with the little ear wiggles. And what did you say that friend's name was? I don't know that I can answer that. I'm pretty sure that one falls under one of those secrets we're not supposed to ask or tell about. He grinned, unable to help the inside joke that slipped out. The doll laid its ears back at the response. Quite rude of you, Martine. Something in the back of Martine's head, deep and masculine, snorted at the bad joke. Bastion's ears wiggled again, and he grinned a little wider. Fair enough. He tilted his head. I remember the name. He chuckled. Ink is not a thing you cast. It's a thing you convince. So, we'll start with learning how to convince your borrowed magic that it is in its best interest to help you. Martine's eyes flicked to the side as if hearing something behind him, then back to Bastion. I never said his name, Martine said slowly. He didn't ask how Bastion knew. That smelled like one of those secrets he wasn't supposed to ask about. At the explanation about ink, though, he gave a long-suffering sigh. Story of my life. There was a very soft giggle that came from the doll. This was going to take a while, and it would be interesting to watch. Bastion smiled a little wider. Magic takes time, practice. I'll give you the same test my teachers did. We'll see if you can master them. Bastion set a rock that he had pulled out of somewhere on the table. Call the stone to you. I'm gonna guess it ain't as easy as calling a dog. Martine quipped and then focused on the rock, trying to remember what he had done to get the magic to work before. Unfortunately, the answer was die, and he wasn't keen to repeat that experience, nor did it seem particularly productive to have to die to cast anything. Convince it to work. How the hell was he supposed to do that? Something told him that please and thank you wasn't the answer. You're a warlock who's been given power, and you didn't get to pick, right? Bastion sat back on his hands. Your friend is probably your patron. Assuming that fact, it stands to reason that you would be given the most opportune cantrips, one of which is prestidigitation. If you cannot move the rock, Bastion called the rock back effortlessly with a flick of his wrist, and it became a candle. Then light the candle. The doll clapped its paws together. Changing one thing to another was always fun. It loved it. It let itself get comfy on Bastion's lap. The problem is, I don't even know where to begin. I've gone my whole life without magic. Real magic, not silly sleight-of-hand parlor tricks. He held out his hand to the candle, trying to make it light. He told it to, and its head pictured it as a lit candle, even asked nicely. You could tell me to go get myself comfy in the wilderness for a week, and I can do that. I could watch Target for days, learn a new language, keep someone from bleeding out. This ain't something I understand even the basics of. The problem is that this, Bastion lit the candle and then put it out, isn't a parlor trick. When a flint strikes and a match starts, does it do it because you picture it, or does it just do it? Bastion raised one angular eyebrow. Just light it, Martine. Light it because you lit it. Nothing else. I didn't say this was, Martine huffed. He was trying, he really was. He just didn't understand it. He understood flint and steel. He understood matches. That was just chemistry and forcing something reactive to heat quickly. He might not understand the exact reason, but he knew how and why they worked. But he wasn't a match or a flint and steel. He was just a guy that didn't know what he was doing. I'm trying. I am. He ran his hand through his hair and leaned on his hand, shooting a withering look at the candle as if he were disappointed at its entire existence. Frankly, he was. He was disappointed in its complete unwillingness to cooperate. Just fucking light. Do not try. Bastian raised his hands. You light a match because it lights. You don't ask why. You strike and it lights. The same is true of magic, especially ink magic. It happens because you say it does, not with your lips, not with your thoughts, with certainty. You light it, it lights. The doll raised a paw and lit the candle, holding its paws up in a see, like that gesture, and then putting it out. It put its paws to its chest, like pushing a force outward, moved its paws out, and then tapped its head, shook it, and pulled its paws toward it, miming, breathe, and then outward slowly. Martine sighed, mildly frustrated, but he tried it like Bastian said. He waved his hand almost dismissively at the damn candle, expecting it to be lit when he looked back. It better be. It wasn't. You can't act like you don't care hard enough to actually not care. Bastian deadpan. Ink either uses you or you use it. As long as you're thinking about it, that's a please. And the ink doesn't answer to please. It needs to be another limb. Something you just do. Something that just happens. He raised a candle. Light it. He would get the magic that had opinions. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about it. That was arguably the hardest part. He thought about everything, probably too much. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, rubbing at the bridge of his nose. Then he focused on that thing in his chest. He could kind of feel it. Kind of. He just sat quietly for a bit, trying to bleed off the frustration. Being frustrated with it probably wouldn't do him any favors. Had to be part of him. He sighed softly. He was overthinking again. Just light it. Just do it. But how? Without thinking about it. Without something that didn't exist in his home. Stop thinking. He hummed a snippet of one of the lullabies he used to sing to his kids in his head. Don't think. Don't try. Just light it. It was going to be lit when he opened his eyes. That's how it worked. He glanced at the candle. Bastian stared at him deadpan, as he just stared. Martine, the only thing you're lighting on fire right now is your brain. He sighed and then put the candle down. He was quiet for a long time. Then he finally put out his hand. May I have some of your ink? The plush looked up at Bastian, ears tilted and his face looking confused, full of questions. Yeah. Martine didn't even try to deny it. Certainly feel like it. He rubbed his neck and then stared at Bastian as if he'd just asked him to solve advanced trig. How? He looked at his hands. You're going to have to explain this to me like I'm stupid. Just hold a hand out. Bastian flicked his ears and a dagger came from his things to rest in his hand. It's not for you. This won't hurt. Martine eyed him as he held out his hand. Best not be for you either. It is. Bastian smiled cheekily and then pricked a finger. Not a lot. He just needed to smear some blood over his hand. With a gentle pass, not touching, just hovering over the skin, he began to pull. Martine's veins grew black and thick, and then into his palm began to well up the black substance. Bastian hesitated for only a moment before he reached down and scooped it up. Then he waited. There was a moment of bracing for impact, and nothing came. There was confusion. He stared at his hand, now coated in ink. Then he flicked his eyes to the candle, and it lit, a black flame that burned and then became just like any other. Huh. It's gentle. The plush stared at the ink as it was pulled from Martine's palm. It watched every movement, every single one. But a few moments, the plush leans back against Bastian, but it doesn't take its buttons off the ink. Martine shook his hand out like someone might do when something tingled. That had single-handedly been the oddest thing he had ever experienced in his life, and he had experienced some pretty odd things. He watched the candle light black and then glanced at Bastian. What do you mean, gentle? He glanced up at the well of blood on Bastian's finger and frowned. He had this gut feeling that it hadn't been necessary, but he didn't know how he knew that. It just felt wrong for some reason. It's not. Bastian gently shifted the ink from one hand to the other and dropped a bit of his blood onto it. It grasped it and then surged toward the finger like it was hungry. But he snarled at it, and that was enough to get it to settle back down. It's been tamed, which is... I'm not sure how it's been tamed. I didn't know it could be tamed. You said your friend was your patron. He looked up and then back down at the ink before he started forming it into balls that he juggled while he thought, as easy as breathing. Your friend is dangerously powerful, and I am very impressed. However, this isn't going to get you to light a candle, so... The ink sharpened into needles and then passed through the flame and hit the floor with a thump, 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 and snuffed the candle. The ink is gentle enough to wait for you, but it is still ink. It must still be an extension of you. You don't tell your lungs to breathe, or it becomes exponentially harder. You don't tell your heart to beat, and... He tossed the ink ball directly at Martine's face, knowing full and well he'd catch it before he had a chance to think. You don't tell your hands to catch something aimed at your face. You just do it. Martine did, just as quick as when he'd been in high school playing football or in the Marines, suffering the lovable jackasses he called his friends. It didn't splat like he expected it to. Bastian glanced at Martine's hand and back, simply raising an eyebrow. He wasn't holding it. It wasn't in his hand or oozing down his arm like ink behaved unchecked. He was exerting magical pressure on it because he'd caught it on instinct alone, and instinct was all that made this work. Like the candle. Martine blinked and flicked his eyes to the candle. His eyebrows drew together, trying to figure out how the hell he lit a candle on instinct. The candle didn't light. What did happen was the ink ball suddenly ran down his sleeve, causing him to yelp and wave his hand as if a bug had crawled down his arm and he was trying to dislodge it. The doll covered its face with its paws the best that it could. Bastian laughed, delighted, and maybe a little younger brother thinks you're funny, but mostly harmless. Well, he drew it off of Martine and into a bottle that he plucked off the bed. We'll try again, I guess. He offered the ink to the warlock with a bemused smile. Hush you, Martine said petulantly, though it came with a grin. He was sure that if it had happened to someone else, Martine would have ended up on the floor after forgetting how to breathe. He took the ink back with a sigh and a chuckle. Practice makes perfect. If you think it'll help. Bastian snapped his fingers at the candle and it lit, an ordinary flame. Try to use emotion to make it work, like lighting a match. The effect happens not when you think or calculate or mime. It happens because it happens. It needs to be instinct, and it needs to be not negotiable. Also, that stuff is poisonous as hell, so, wash your arm. The doll turned from where it was sitting, leaning its side against Bastian's stomach and chest. Its tail flicked and the candle went out. Martine didn't even try to light it. He rose with a fuck and went to wash his arm. Bastian snorted through his nose and prestidigitated his hands clean. If you feel warm and fuzzy and a little woozy, it's normal. You probably won't die.